Good morning and welcome to the latest public webinar from DeltaEE. I hope you, your family and colleagues are all keeping safe and well. In this webinar, we'll be talking about gamification and how it can improve energy customer engagement. I'm David Trevithick, Principal Analyst at DeltaEE, and I'm joined today by Suzhong Zhang under lockdown in Paris, who's worked with me on the research into gamified solutions. I'm based in Scotland under partial lockdown, and we're delighted to also have a guest speaker, Jeremy Woolley in England, about to experience lockdown again as well. He's Head of Flexibility and Analytics at GenGame, a UK-based startup specialising in gamification in the energy sector. Do you want to quickly say hello?
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone.
Thanks. Great. So as the energy transition accelerates, energy companies are focusing more and more on customer engagement to pivot from those commodity-based sales strategies towards energy services. Applying game thinking and mechanics to improve customer experience and boost business performance is a relatively new concept in at least the energy sector for customer engagement. So in this webinar, we will be discovering how gamification is driving energy customer engagement. What are the challenges we're facing in bringing gamified energy insight solutions to market and how they're overcome, and how gamification can support long-term customer engagement initiatives. We'll be sharing some of the findings from our recent research and also be talking to Jeremy about his experience at GenGame in this market. As ever, we welcome your questions, which you can ask in the software. We'll try and answer them during the course of the webinar, depending on the number of them and how relevant they are to the actual discussion we've got. But if not, then we'll contact you afterwards to follow up on them. So please feel free to use that. In terms of timings, we have got scheduled for the hour, but we'll try and finish a little bit early if we can. First, some background on DeltaEE, as I know there'll be a few people on the webinar who aren't familiar with us. DeltaEE is a research and consulting company, enabling our clients to capture market opportunities from the energy transition. With a multinational team, we have deep expertise across key sort of new energy categories, and we use this to support all types of organisations with an interest in this space, such as energy suppliers, product manufacturers, network operators, policy makers and investors. Our core clients are generally in Europe, and that's where our focus is, but increasingly so in Japan too. And we serve them through subscription, research services and consultancy. We're focusing on digital energy today on the right-hand side of this slide, and specifically around energy insights. When we talk about energy insights, we're referring to the energy consumption data that's generated from smart meters or other hardware like clamps and sensors, from software and from AI, and how it is packaged and displayed for energy customers to access and benefit from. Bringing customers along on the energy transition is a critical part of most new energy solutions. And much of the changing customer needs and expectations, technology advances from smart meters and the smart home to new energy technology, and energy companies' commercial pressures from competition, digitalization and cost to serve are driving the role of energy consumption insights in the energy transition. So what is gamification and how does it fit in? Well, we see gamification as the application of game design to non-gaming environments to improve customer experience and boost that business performance. It draws on game dynamics such as badges and levels and leaderboards, and its design follows sort of behavioural science theories around sort of motivation and habit sort of formation. Think of brands like Fitbit. If you know this, it encourages exercise and keeping fit by making exercise fun through the currency of the steps you run, walk or climb, creating fun challenges and measuring progress and rewarding achievement. So gamification differs from traditional energy engagement techniques as it leans on individuals' desire for things like status and achievement, competition and the need to be part of a social community. Gamification techniques are all around us and embedded in business models from Facebook to Fitbit, as I mentioned. Importantly, it can also be applied in low engagement sectors, such as sort of public transport, insurance, and utilities, of course, to drive customer engagement. So a couple of examples on the right-hand side. Firstly, in transport, well, this is car driving rather than public transport, a safety initiative in Stockholm designed to reduce speed. And what it was is a visible checkpoint with the speed displayed, and drivers going below the speed limit entered into a lottery to win money for good behaviour. The funds were collected through fines from drivers driving above the speed limit, and the net result being an average driving speed of 20% less than it was previously. And insurance, perhaps a typical sort of low engagement sector, a global company launched an online gamification program, breaking down insurance into a series of learning tasks. And of those that completed them, a third actually added funds to their retirement plans or actually bought new services. So to tell us more about how it's used in energy, I'll hand over to Suzhang, who has been studying gamified solutions within Energy Insights.
Yeah, thanks, Davey. Thanks, Star, for your introduction about how we define Energy Insights and gamification. And I just say that gamification can be applied to some low-engaged industries such as energy. And as a fact, quite a lot of energy companies today has been actively exploring opportunities for gamification. So in this map, we have selected some innovative examples of gamified energy services. It mostly focuses on Europe, but you can also find some interesting cases outside Europe. To briefly compare Europe and other markets, we found that in Europe, gamification is previously supporting more customer education and engagement programs, while outside Europe, like in the States, Australia, and in Japan, there are some good examples to show how gamification is influencing behavioral changes to use some gaming conceptions. We're also now seeing that there's a shift and a trend in Europe that is moving towards more behavioral change activities. We're not going to too many details here in these slides, but we're going to mention some of these examples later in this webinar. So moving to the next slide. So here, in these slides, we will be able to see what are the key elements that make up a gamification design. In this chart, from the bottom to the top, the level of engagement is increasing. So this is for the customer engagement level. With the bottom two elements, the user interface and information feedback, you can form a basic energy insights product and also a gamification product. Thinking about information feedback, we can talk about some historical energy consumption, some impact on environment or on climate change, and the user interface, we usually talk about a customer app or some web portal things. Then to increase the engagement level, you can start to add some gaming conceptions like the performance status. We can think about some badges, points, or leaderboards. Then a rewarding system. It could be financial rewards like vouchers, some energy bills discount, or it could also be non-financial like some charity donations or even to plant a tree, which I saw in some of the cases. And finally, to increase some sense of community belonging, you can also build some social connections like social house comparisons, also energy communities to increase people's sense of community belongings.
So, Suzhang, I've previously been asked the question of whether time of use tariffs actually qualify as gamification. And from this diagram, time of use tariffs contain elements such as the incentive, the reward mechanism, and the fact that performance perhaps isn't known in advance, but can be influenced by a customer's behavior. However, presumably by itself, a time of use tariff isn't gamification, as it's missing these other aspects. Would that interpretation be right?
Yeah, I think so. Good point. Time of use tariff itself, from my perspective, I think it is not gamification, but it could be seen as part of a gamification tool. Because most of the cases, the incentives and the performance is unknown in advance for time of use tariff. It's not like a simple price discount. But if you combine it with other gamified elements, like if you provide feedback on the performance of all the participants, or if you add a user interface for them to navigate, I think it could be defined as part of a gamification program, but it's not the tariff itself. Does that clear for you?
Yeah, and I hope so for our audience. That clears it up. Thank you.
Yeah. And maybe to add more points for the rewarding systems, actually we have these two kind of the rewards. One is the monetary rewards and one is non-monetary rewards. In most cases, you need to have both to incentive customers with their both extrinsic motivations and also intrinsic motivation. So monetary rewards, sometimes they have a very good short-term effects on, because it can tap into customers' extrinsic motivations. But for longer-term considerations, you need more non-monetary rewards to meet customers' intrinsic motivation. So let them know what will these behaviors, how could them change my energy consumptions, and what are the benefits for the climate, for the environment. So this can keep them continuing to take actions for gamified energy services. Yeah. Move to the next slide. So how can gamification improve energy insight services? We have defined 3 use cases. The first one is by raising consumer awareness and knowledge. Actually, this step is very important, but it's sometimes a step that bypass for some solutions that is targeting only the pre-engaged consumers. If you want to target the mainstream customers, actually it's very important for these customers to be familiar to their energy consumptions and to learn the value of saving energy. Talking about raising awareness, we are providing some insights about the energy use, the energy bills, and also the impact on climate changes, and also to send them alerts and some energy saving tips. In terms of the techniques you can use, for example, you can show some energy saving knowledges from the quiz, which we can see an example in Australia, a utility called Endeavour Energy. They are having learn and saving programs that challenge customers every day to learn some knowledges from some daily challenge, and then they can earn some points from these daily challenges. You can also do it through serious games. One example is EDF UK's Energy Aware program. So in that mobile app, you will actually see a virtual house of your of the social housings, and then you will be able to see what are the actual consumptions in your house, and then you learn how to improve, how to save your energy consumption. Also, you can do it through social comparisons. It was not mentioned here, but one example could be a Greek utility called Protergia. They are not only comparing you to a neighborhood, to your similar houses, they're also comparing your consumption to the top 10% of the consumers, and to let you know what are the ultimate goal and what level can we achieve if you save your energy. So all these peer comparisons could be a technique used in energy insights and gamification to help customers to understand of their home energy use. The second use case that we define is to improve customer engagement. So I think today, no matter for incumbents or challenge brands, customer engagement remain a driving focus for European energy retailers. This is also where most of the energy insight services are at. To improve the customer engagement, gamification can help in 2 ways. One is to deepen the existing relationship, and another one is to prolong the engagement. So talking about deepen the engagement, very different from other customer services. It can dial up the fund of energy monitoring. It can build a more positive brand image, and it can also increase the time that customers spend with the services in this positive frame of mind. So from one of the projects led by Energy in Germany, I think it was partnered with energy insights vendor NetGrid. They have shown some results that using gamified items like the leaderboards or some incentives, it can actually double or triple the time that customers spend their time in the Energy Insights apps. And to prolong the customer engagement, we're always discussing how to achieve longer term engagement. But for gamification, once the engine was built, you can always refresh your pipeline. Once people finish the challenges, you can add new challenges for them to continue to participate in. And think about when we are showing customers their accumulated points or the badges they have earned, maybe they will reconsider when they are of losing these points when they are switching the supplier. And finally, the improvement of the customer engagement will naturally lead to a question that can gamification reduce the customer churn? I'll say that our opinion is that gamification can extend the engagement level and contribute to the customer churn, but it is not a silver bullet. It's very hard to say a strong evidence that determines how gamification is influencing the customer churn, but there is a potential on that. And one of the example is Enamel in Austria, in their Pick app. They're actually showing that a positive reduction from 10% to around 7% of customer churns because of these gamified Energy Insights apps. But there are many factors to influence on this, so it's very hard to say a specific contribution for gamification.
Great, thanks. We've got a question actually come in that I'd like to address. When comparing customers in gamification, how do you think about the issues around fair comparability? So, for instance, when some households have fewer occupants than others, and I think it's a fair question. I mean, no household's identical to another. We all have a different number of occupants, use energy in different ways. So getting that fair comparison is definitely difficult. I don't know if any of the panelists have anything to say on this, but I think a lot of it's down to both the AI within that and understanding the household makeup, but also from customer input as well. A lot of it's captured from number of occupants, size of house, for instance, number of rooms, can also be driven by customer input as well through surveys.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's important to let users compare on their own terms. They have a view of what their home looks like. So if you can give them options to kind of select what they're compared against, tailoring is just good user interface and user experience really, but show them how they compare against all homes and let them narrow down to their own category, because they get something back for telling you about their home in that way.
Yeah, I also think so. I think there are many different kind of cases you can do self comparisons. The example that I mentioned in the UDF UK case, they're also comparing some social housing, so they kind of have the same equipment, setups in the housing, so that will make it easier for them to compare similar houses. Great. So if we move to the last use case for how gamification is improving energy insight services, I think it's the ultimate step to encourage customers' behavioral changes. So there are two types of activities to encourage the behavioral change. One is through the event-based activities, and another one is through the continuous activities. Talking about event-based activities is to encouraging customers of their participation and positive behavior changes for some specific time during, such as load shifting during the peak demand times, or some extreme heat weather conditions. One example is from Gemini Energy Network, which was from Australia. They were testing some personal and also community incentives to encourage people's participation in demand response programs. And another way to encourage behavioral changes is through some continuous activities, because people also need to participate in their daily lives to encourage some changes for the energy habits over a longer time framework. And in this way, they can also sustain some good energy habits and to continuously contribute to the balance of the electric grid. there are a lot of examples on these. The example that we mentioned before, the EDF UK case for the energy aware, they have daily challenges that let you to complete some energy saving tasks every day. So this will keep continuously taking part in these kind of gamified activities. Also, some programs that we might mention later is electricity program that was led by GenGame that let customers to check their EV charging time every day, so they can participate in reducing the stress of the grid in the daily life. So these are two combination of the different kind of behavioral changes that we can help with the gamification. And finally, we can see that these three gamification use cases can jointly influence the energy customer engagement. Here you can see there are three different levels of engagement that we define for energy customer engagement. One is purely engaging, the second one is to empower them, and then the last one is to collaborate with customers to both contribute to a better, a healthier grid. You can see that different kind of these use cases can actually contribute to different types of customers. For example, for customers, for the mainstream customers who are only engaged before, you may think about only to raise the awareness, understanding of them. And then for the other prosumers or some early adopters, you can already start to think about to encourage the behavioral change for them. The second point, the improving customer engagement, will be very useful for the three levels of the different types of engaged customers. Yeah, I think that's it for a brief introduction of how gamification is improving the energy insight services.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, I think it's an important side actually, because a lot of the sort of trials around gamification is focused on the energy engaged audience. Actually think about the mainstream audience and bringing them into the mix is quite an important area. So thank you for that. We've got a couple of questions that are coming in. One, just to clarify, yes, the slides will be made available afterwards, and also the recording of the webinar, so we'll send that around. There's been one or two questions actually around the sort of the business model, you know, the is it subscription based, is it added into a tariff? I think we'll come on to that in a little bit with a discussion with Jeremy, so I think we might reflect on that then. For now, I think it would be good to launch a poll and get your views. So if I can just move on a slide. Here we go. Right. So we're going to launch a poll. The question being, how widely used is gamification in the residential energy transition at the moment? Hasn't started, some pilot projects, a few small-scale deployments, or it's at a part of the toolkit, it's business as usual. So I'm going to launch the poll. Hopefully you can now see that on screen. The poll is now open. Yes, I can see some people voting already. That's great. So I'll give a little bit of time and see where people are coming in. Yeah, there seems to be one clear leader, if there's such a thing, at the moment. So I'll just give it another few seconds just to see. Yeah, about 2/3 of us have voted so far. So just give it another couple of seconds to get your final vote in. So I think I'll close that off now. I think we've got a clear winner, and then I'll try and share that. So hopefully we should be able to see that up on the screen, which shows really that some pilot projects are the one that most people think is there. Which, I mean, again, open to the panelists if they want to reflect and comment on that. I mean, certainly in our research, that's what we found. You know, there's very little really in full-scale deployment, and certainly it's not part of the toolkit for most energy companies. Obviously, some of the startups, it might well be part of their toolkit, but for the sort of certainly the bigger energy companies, that's not the case. Does anybody want to reflect on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, it's nice actually to see it coming through, as you say, with some suppliers in regular use, but it's definitely not the norm. I'd agree.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And we've got one second poll as well. So I'll just get that one up on screen. So where is the biggest need for gamification to advance the energy transition? So we've heard from Sujan around the sort of 3 major business cases around sort of customer awareness and understanding, customer engagement, and customer behavior change. So it would be good to get your view on that. So I'll just launch that, which hopefully you can now see on screen. Yes, I can see people voting already. Great. So yeah, where is the greatest need for gamification to advance the energy transition? So I'll keep this open for a few more minutes. Lots of votes coming in. Starting to get a winner, I think, out of this as well. So we're close, about 2/3 of you have voted. I'll just give you a couple more seconds just to cast your vote. Hopefully we'll get the results and share it a bit quicker than the US presidential election. Right, I think we'll close it off there. And if I can share that with you as well. Hopefully up on the screen you should be able to see now the results of that. So behaviour change, customer behaviour change has been the predominant one, which again, we'll welcome comments from panelists, but I would definitely agree with that. That's where the need is. But I think to get there, we need to engage in, through awareness and engagement as well. You can't just jump straight in there, apart from perhaps those already very engaged and the prosumers already there. So I think all stages are probably needed in this, but yeah, the biggest need definitely is behaviour change from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm also agreed with that. Yeah, sorry, go on, Jeremy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think sometimes there's a lot of overlap between those 2 most popular ones, well, all 3 actually, because if a lot of the ways you might want to change people's behavior requires engagement and awareness. So a lot of the time they do come together, but I think behavior change is, from the utilities perspective, probably the main driver.
Yeah, I would like also to add the same point, because customer engagement, it can accompany the whole process of gamification. And when we initially set up the 3 use cases, we're also thinking about to do it step by step. So you can't forget the mainstream of the customers. So you still need to think about how to raise their awareness about this.
Great. Okay, I think that's it. So thank you for that. I'll hide those results, and then we'll move on to the next section of the webinar, which is around a discussion. So this is where I can bring in Jeremy, and I think about one or two of the questions actually coming up as well. We've had a little bit about sort of the business case and the sort of the practicalities coming up. We've had a little bit about sort of the resources available to startups. So I think some of these sort of questions we can help to address as well, I think, in the conversation coming up. So, as I say, you've heard from myself and Sujan. We'd now like to introduce our guest, Jeremy Woolley, Head of Flexibility and Analytics at GenGame, a UK startup specialising in gamification in the energy sector. So, welcome and hello again, Jeremy. First off, we'd like to say a few words, actually, just to introduce yourself and GenGame.
Yeah, so some of you may have heard of us, but yeah, I'm Head of Flexibility and Analytics at GenGame, and we help energy utilities with customer engagement. We focus on residential energy customers, and we typically use mobile apps right across all of the technology areas that you identified, so from EVs through to smart metering, heat, and yeah, it's all kind of centered on digital, but yeah, we use mobile apps often with gamification included to improve customer engagement. But yeah, there are lots of different utility problems that we address and have addressed, but yeah, interested to chat.
Great, thank you. Yes. So we're going to talk first off a little bit about a deep dive in terms of one of the projects you've been working on, Northern Power Grid, and then we'll talk a little bit more generally as well and try and sort of capture some of those questions. So reminder, do keep those questions coming in. We may not be able to cover them all, but we'll do what we can within that, and we'll go from there. So I think I might even see if I can share our webcams at this stage as well. Actually, might be sensible. If this will work. So with any luck, you might be able to see us. Okay, here, great. Okay, so yeah, to start with, let's discuss this particular example that you've been working on, Jeremy. It's a 3-year project entitled sort of activating community engagement, and it's gamified solutions to improve performance in demand response programs in a DNO region. So firstly, I mean, considering it's a 3-year project, a lot of thought, a lot of planning must have gone into it. So can you sort of talk us through some of the pre-launch planning? What was the project sort of trying to deliver? How was gamification? How did that element work? How do you work with the client?
Yeah, sure. I'll start off actually by saying, yeah, so it was a 3-year project and it ended a couple of years ago, but I think we've singled it out because it is the most heavily gamified project we've ever done. So it's got, yeah, the most relevant for talking about here. But this was working with Northern Power Grid to achieve local DNO demand response capacity. They had constraints in different areas, so wanted to know whether residential used, whether games could improve that, and essentially what we could deliver. So in terms of the planning for that, for us, it was about understanding what a solution could look like, what their success criteria were, what their constraints looked like, when they occurred, how localized they were. So a lot of the planning was on actually what do we need to achieve for this to be considered a success, and how are we going to measure those things. So it was, yeah, working with them to understand the network problems, the customers that were in those kinds of areas, the tools that we had available to us. Technology's come on a long time since 5 years ago around smart metering. A lot of things that are available now were not available then. So it was around what's available for us to use that can help us deliver the response that they need.
And what are the sort of key sort of business metrics you identified as critical to the success of the project?
So I guess the biggest one is demand response capacity at the critical times for them. That's probably the main driver, but there's a whole load around that as well, in terms of how much does it cost to run, how much does it cost to recruit people, what penetration of users can we get in certain areas, because it's no good having a very sparse set of users because the constraints were very localized. So yeah, there was a whole mix, but generally around cost, retention, and response, demand response.
Okay. So how did the project unfold then, in terms of, was there a soft launch, and how was the tweaking done beyond that?
Yeah, so it went through quite a lot of phases over the 3 years. There were multiple launches of different iterations of the product. The first iteration was launched in a very rural community in Weardale, sort of County Durham, and it was very much based around community organisations, and our interfaces were generally web-based, not mobile apps. And then by the end, we were looking very urban, sort of younger, more urban audience, and also delivered by a mobile app. So yeah, it changed a lot. The recruitment methods changed. By the end of it, we were doing a lot on social media marketing, so we got quite good at that, and driving the customer recruitment costs down rather than doing roadshows through farming communities. Yeah, it did change a lot.
Great. So could you share some of the results from it, and also some of the learnings? Because obviously, as you say, you covered a lot of ground in that project. So presumably there are good sort of learnings you could take forward in other projects, and would be interested in the audience as well.
Yeah, so I think probably the main thing we learned through doing that is that you can make energy about something other than than energy. So the example you got on screen there was a spaceship game. So we completely abstracted it from energy, and they would control the height of their spaceship on the screen by switching things on and off in their home in real time, and it would update. And that was just far more interesting to a lot of people than if you trying to explain it from a grid point of view, because your local substation's in trouble, which is just not their problem in a way, or that's how they see it. But yeah, the main results from purely behavioral demand response, we got, I think it was 12% average reductions at peak time. We did those very cheaply with the incentive model that we had in place, which was raffle based. So I think it was less than sort of 50p per event that we were running, per user per event for that 10% or 12% response. And I think the comparable trials at the time were offering sort of £5 and £10 incentives per event. So it was, yeah, an order of magnitude cheaper by making it a fun proposition. And that's the kind of mentality that we've brought forward onto our products nowadays, which are, I would say, less game focused. They're more functionally focused for energy suppliers and utilities, but we've kept the elements of gamification to keep the kind of the interest and the enjoyment factor in there, which energy very often lacks.
Yeah, okay. So we had a question actually come up, which is an interesting one. Were there no partnerships with suppliers for recruitment? It's a shame that suppliers themselves seem to be limited or have limited incentives to help the grid balance supply and demand. So I know obviously you've been involved in a number of projects, some of which with energy suppliers. So would you comment on that?
Yeah, so nowadays we've shifted our focus to working with energy suppliers because they have a direct customer relationship. The ACE project was with a DNO who had no direct relationship with their residential customers. The kinds of results that we got, there wasn't really a market for it at the time for DNOs. Nowadays we're seeing DSO flexibility schemes coming through, but the focus now on working with energy suppliers is because they have much more immediate and much more valuable problems around engagement, retention, lowering cost to serve, flexibility, all of those areas, which when you apply gamification to them, you can boost all of the metrics. So that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to flick through some of the other questions, but we'll try and answer one or two of them as we go through. So thanks for that. A bit of a deep dive on one particular project. So I think let's sort of draw it a little bit more broadly, I think now. This is sort of a more wider Q&A. So I think this is where we can start talking about some of the broader issues and try and capture any other questions that are coming through. So thanks for all those that have been coming through. I think to start with, I think it's just interesting to identify what are the common sort of challenges with gamified energy insight solutions that have been faced, both from the kind of the startup perspective as well as the the energy client, whether it's energy supplier or elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of the time it's about understanding the problem that you're trying to solve and making sure that the design you're doing does actually address that, and that the scheme and the incentives and whatever it is you're putting in place will actually address the problem that you're trying to solve. The other end of that is actually measuring the impact, which can be very hard. So I think I gave the example earlier of the churn reduction from 10% to 7%. There are lots of factors impacting that. So how do you single out your impact on a much wider utility metric? So we do put things in place to try and narrow that down, but measuring it can be difficult, essentially. Designing it can be difficult because you've got to understand both the audience that you're trying to reach. It can be different channels you're getting out to them on. They can be vastly different types of household. Going back to the question earlier about how many occupants, how many, how do you pitch it so it actually speaks to people and they think it's relevant to them? But yeah, that's just a couple.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. No, I think you're right. There's lots of them. I mean, engagement for the long term, I think, is a big challenge, and I think that's been raised actually in the questions for the audience. If I can just dig out the right one. Yeah, so one issue around the impacts of gamification is it's short-lived. People tend to lose interest in all games after a relatively short period of time. To what extent has gamification been maintained? This was throughout the ACE project, but I think the comment is also kind of more general. I mean, people do naturally gravitate to what's new and exciting. So how do you keep people engaged beyond that sort of 3 months to 3 years? What's the sort of secret to do that?
You keep changing it, I suppose. It's one answer to that. So yeah, if there's no change in the service that's being offered to you, and that's what we're trying to promote, you need to keep introducing new features, new incentives, new angles, new insights, to keep it interesting. So on the ACE project, that's the longest single trial we've worked on, about 2,000 homes. And what we saw there was quite a high initial spike in interest, and then it tails off over the months. So then we start bringing in new features, or maybe new levels and things like that, and you can kind of win people back, and then it will kind of plateau at a level. But if you do nothing for a couple of years and don't change it, then there'll be a level of interest that remains, but it will drop off. So it's it's about keeping it fresh, keeping it interesting, keeping the incentives at the right level, making it personal as well, I think. So trying to understand and differentiate between who you're targeting and make sure it's relevant to them as much as possible. Some people don't like being hassled. They see it as engagement for the sake of engagement, which isn't always a good thing. So it's about giving different people what they each want.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that. I mean, lots of things you said, change and keeping things fresh. I think the key things, opening up new levels, new systems. Yeah, I mean, certainly, I know Briturgy do that sort of very successfully, and it's one sort of Greek energy retailer. Sort of changing the experience, introducing sort of double points, accumulated points, and use sort of loss aversion tactics. So people, say engage with fear of losing those accumulated points, for instance, and sort of single events often have a kind of short-term impact, whereas the sort of long-term programs deliver those cumulative results, and often it's the combination of the two. Multiple event-based events will combine, that engagement over a series of challenges over time. So it's kind of quite key. So thanks for that. So apologies, there's a lot of pop-ups coming to my screen, so hopefully I've got rid of them all. Apologies for the audience for that. I understand what my kids' activities are going on at the moment. I think we're kind of running short on time, so the questions that we haven't yet answered, we'll try and follow up on from that. I think one sort of final question, I think, for you, Jeremy, I think is kind of where do you see gamification in the energy sector headed? So, if we're going to, fast forward sort of 5 years, we looked at those, the audience poll saying they're all sort of pilots. Do you see them then turning to scale deployment? What do you see is going to be happening in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think it will. 5 years, it'll probably nudge up one or two steps on that, the poll options you gave earlier. I don't think every supplier is going to embrace and use it, but I think those that do will see the benefits through their statistics. I think we'll see it particularly as the grid moves towards a kind of smarter two-way grid. I think the benefits of two-way communication and customer engagement will become more pronounced, because it's very, you can do a two-way grid much better if you're informed from the customer's point of view as well about their preferences. And I think getting that engagement, gamification is a key technique for doing that. So I think there's a lot of places where it will become increasingly valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, great. And just one final question, just because it's quite a nice one. We're planning this. We're thinking about whether we should actually create sort of a gamified experience here on the webinar. We chose not to, but it plays into the last question. Do games have to be fun to be effective? A lot of them are playful, that they look at the fun element to it, but is that a necessity?
I think it helps. I don't think it's strictly a necessity. yeah, I think it, well, comes down to how you define a game as well. But yeah, no, I don't think it has to be fun, but I think you can have a sense of achievement without it being fun. And that's part of what makes it a game. So.
Yeah, no, understood. Great.
Sorry for jumping in the discussion. Just want to say that I think the ultimate goal for gamified energy insights products, I think the ultimate goal is to save the energy. So that would be the most important motivation for customers. But so I think the fun of the game could be the second or the third option for that.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think that's great. So I say there are lots more questions. We'll try and cover them individually and following up with you. But thank you for all those. So we had a whole load of them, so we can't get through them all, I'm afraid. But thank you for that. So I was actually going to stop sharing my webinar and just talk to you the last couple of slides as we draw the webinar to a close. I'd just like really to let you know about the research service Energy Insights Plus, which is the team really that's brought you this webinar. We research a range of topics on energy insights, such as where the market is now, where it's headed, gaining the consumer view of energy insights, and our next report is on the value of real-time data. We also cover viewpoints and databases, such as a recent database on smart meter-enabled customer solutions. And we have developed profiles for around 50 energy insight solutions now from both energy suppliers and vendors. Also, we're now on series 7 of our popular Talking New Energy podcast. So if you haven't yet checked that out, I would encourage you to do so. It covers a vast spectrum of topics all around the energy transition. So I want to say again, thank you to Jeremy Woolley as guest speaker, and thank you from Suzanne and myself for taking the time out of your diaries to attend this webinar. Feel free to get in contact to continue the conversation. We always love to hear from you. But otherwise, saying thank you, goodbye, and stay safe.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.